I've already spotted some conservators looking aghast at this manuscript, which has suffered some harvest damage, which I'm sure we will hear more about at the end of the session. We don't want any more of this, but you're very welcome to come and have a closer look. So, without further ado, Alessandra, thank you.
Before I begin, perhaps a small warning. I'm a Byzantinist, so if at any point something becomes obscure or mysteriously theological and you would like a clarification, I'll be happy to answer all your questions later, perhaps with a second cup of coffee. The major medieval religious division that shaped and in many ways still shapes Europe is the schism between the Western Church, Catholic Church, and the Eastern Church, the Orthodox Church. Rooted in the early centuries of Christianity, this estrangement reached its symbolic apex in the mutual excommunication of 1054, only formally revoked in 1965 by Pope Paul VI and Patriarch Athenagoras. In other words, it took the Church almost a millennium to agree that perhaps mutual excommunication had not been the ideal long-term strategy. The separation had profound historical, political, and social consequences, generating a vast body of polemical literature in Greek, Latin, and Slavonic. Thinkers such as Photius, but also Anselm of Canterbury, Thomas Aquinas, Gregory Palamas, participated in these debates, particularly on papal primacy and the procession of the Holy Spirit, the so famous Filioque clause. Yet despite the importance of these controversies, and although the causes of the schism have been extensively investigated, a large part of the textual tradition concerning relations between the churches remains unidentified and insufficiently studied, certainly largely unexplored. As for the study of this kind of material, Leo Allacci, in his De Ecclesia Occidentalis Atque Orientalis Perpetua Consensione, published in 1648, is a major book, reference book. Another one could be Andronicus de Metracopoulos Orthodoxos Hellas, published in 1872. So, some of the scholarship still fundamental to the field is now old enough to be cited both as primary and secondary literature. Since 2020, together with the colleague Marie-Hélène Blanchet of the Collège de France, I have co-directed the online Repertorium Auctorum Polemicorum, which we call RAP. The first systematic attempt to catalog Greek, Latin, and Slavonic polemical texts concerning relation between the churches, including many anonymous and previously unidentified work, long absent from traditional scholarly publications. And usually at this point my colleagues say, and there must be a reason why. I put a QR code because I was very envious because a couple of weeks ago we had a QR code, so if you want to see the repertorium, you can access the repertoire. RAP collaborates with PINACES, the database of the Institut de Recherche et d'Histoire des Textes in Paris, the principal international repertory of Greek manuscripts. In less technical language, we are trying to make this text discoverable before another 500-year pass. Let's say why a repertorium is interesting and can change our understanding. Traditional scholarship has focused primarily on political events, while the immense polemical literature generated by these controversies has been neglected. But reconstructing the history of the schism through events alone cannot provide a fully reliable picture of medieval East-West relation. Council, diplomatic ruptures, excommunication, and imperial negotiation reveal only a part of this story. The literature produced around this controversy preserves something equally important: the intellectual, theological, rhetorical mechanisms through which the division was interpreted, justified, negotiated, and transmitted across generations. Medieval theologians, after all, didn't spend all their time dramatically excommunicating each other. They also devoted countless hours to compiling anthologies, debating the procession of the Holy Spirit, arguing over the correct nature of the Eucharist bread, so if you put leaven or not, yeast or not, or wondering whether the beavers were technically fish and therefore permissible during Lent. The absence of a comprehensive repertorium has therefore constituted a major obstacle to research. Several factors explain this neglect. The philological complexity of the material, its dense theological and philosophical contents, the difficult structure of compilatory works, the still incomplete description of many Greek manuscripts, and moreover, the tendency of modern scholarship to regard medieval polemical literature as repetitive and derivative, which admittedly sometimes it is. The creation of RAP, therefore, represents an important methodological advancement because for the first time it seeks to make this dispersed and neglected material visible as a coherent corpus, allowing us to reconstruct a complex network of textual transmission, intellectual exchanges, cultural interaction that connected Greek, Latin, and Slavonic traditions over the centuries. Some technicalities for the nerds. With RAP, each text is analyzed through identification of the author where possible, registration of titulus, incipit, designate, assignment of unique identification number, because you know the titles sometimes change, description through literary, theological, and lexical keywords. Manuscript foliation, of course, and dating are verified. The resulting data, which I'm collecting now from the Bodleian Library collection, are integrated both in RAP and in Pinakes, and so I will include also the available description of the manuscript for the Bodleian Library. And thank you for the scholarship. Let's move to the manuscript. I don't know, can they move forward?
I hope they do.
I'll start from here. The Barocci 76. Barocci 76 is a late Byzantine scholarly manuscript associated with important Cretan humanist scribes. Alongside classical authors such as Aristotle or Plutarch, it preserved grammatical, patristic, anti-Latin texts, illustrating the close coexistence of classical paideia and theological controversy in Byzantine learned culture. Particularly noteworthy here is the treatise by Michael Apostoliis attacking those who claim that both the intellectual superiority of the Westerners and the correctness of their teaching on the procession of the Holy Spirit. That's very, and is describing, what was striking for me is that it's describing the Latins as Westerners and the Byzantine as Easterners, which is something we could debate with the Byzantines. The Barocci 91 is a 15th century, again, is a miscellany, containing, among other materials, several anti-Latin texts. Particularly noteworthy are a number of cut folios, around the 16 verses. In my opinion, they are removed from an anti-Latin dossier for two reasons. There are a couple of words that I could read that are telling, and also because it's followed by a letter of Patriarch Germanos II to the papal legate. The manuscript preserved the Anonymous de Latinorum Erroribus, a striking example of how Latin polemic extended well beyond theology into question of ritual practice, cultural habit, and ecclesiastical identity. The Archivi Seldeniani B47 is a 17th century manuscript devoted largely to anti-Latin theology, especially debates on the Filioque, in the aftermath of the Council of Ferrara-Florence, which is dated 1438-39. It was the last attempt to reunify the two churches. Of particular interest is a short treatise, well, actually it's not a treatise, but anyway, O tu Melissus parallelismos, the fallacy of Melissus, which uses logical diagrams and syllogistic reasoning to argue theological points. It offers a striking example of Aristotelian logic pressed into the service of post-Byzantine polemic. The Canonici 115 is superb because it's so small that I loved it, so I want you to see it. It's a small but elegant manuscript, probably copied in Corfu or Venice in the first half of the 16th century. It preserved an apparently unpublished anonymous dialogue against the Roman primacy, and this is particularly noteworthy since the majority of the anti-Latin dialogues focus on theological issues, on the filioque, and not on the papal authority. That's because medieval polemic, like academic specialization, had its preferred subject. So it was not the filioque, but the papal primacy in this case. Holkham 79 is a substantial 15th century manuscript copied mainly by Ioannis Plousiadinos, an important intellectual figure of Venetian Crete. The codex preserves a large dossier connected with the Council of Ferrara-Florence, and the manuscript is especially important because it belonged to Vessarion, that for the Venetians is a myth, but also for the Byzantinists, whose coat of arms appear at folio 4 verses. Vessarion was a supporter of the Union of Florence, a cardinal of the Roman Church, a mediator between Greek and Latin intellectual tradition, and played a decisive role in transmitting Greek learning to the Italian Renaissance, which is something that we usually forget, the role of Greek emigre. Rho 2022 is enormous, so it was nice to have super small and super big. It's an extremely important manuscript, was copied in 1286, and basically is the Panoplia Dogmatiki, written by Niketas Koniatis, one of the major Byzantine heresiological compilations, and also preserves some texts related to the events of 1054, so-called schism. To conclude, this manuscript reminds us that schism was not a single event, but a long intellectual conversation, sometimes very sophisticated, sometimes repetitive, occasionally rather petty, preserved not only in famous theological treatises, but also in anonymous compilations, damaged folios, marginal notes, and manuscripts quietly waiting here in the Bodleian to be read again. Thank you.